my tail. I did the Iditarod trail.
Welcome to another episode of Husky Talk. We are currently less than 50 days from the start. Our guest today is an Iditarod veteran with 21 finishes. He has 8 top 10 finishes, with his best finish being runner-up in 2021. He stepped away after the 2022 race and is back this year. Please welcome to the show, Aaron Burmeister.
Hi,
Thank you, guys.
Hi,
Go
Aaron.
ahead.
Welcome to the show. In your Iditarod bio, it says dog mushing has been a way of life for you since you were born. Were there specific influence or experience in your early years that fueled your passion for dog mushing?
Well, absolutely, there was. Great question. You know, I was born and raised in Nome at the end of Iditarod. Both of my parents, my mother and my father, were very involved in helping get the first Iditarod started. And that was before I was born in 73. So they worked in Nome to help put the race together. Dad spent a lot of time working on the trail and helping coordinate musher housing and everything in Nome. So they were very involved in the event from the beginning. And I grew up in Nome at the end of the Iditarod, and my family had a dog team. So it was just something naturally I fell in love with. And to me, the Iditarod mushers were my heroes as a kid growing up. And when they came into town in March, oftentimes many of them stayed at our home with us. And my dad raced the Iditarod in 1979 and 1982 when I was just a little kid. So I grew up around the event, running dogs and racing the junior races in Nome. There was a very active racing circuit in Nome. And when I turned 14, of course, I ran the junior Iditarod and did that several times, and ran the Iditarod when I turned 18. So it was something that I grew up in love with, and an event that I always look forward to.
You've completed the Iditarod 21 times. Can you take us through your first experience back in 1994 and what it was like?
So as a young man growing up in Nome is on the west coast of Alaska. So there's no trees for hundreds of miles, and it's windblown open country with rolling hills. And it was a wonderful place to grow up, wonderful lifestyle, but that's what I thought it was like everywhere. And when I started traveling and racing outside of Nome, running through trees were a whole different experience. I can remember more about my first Iditarod in 1994 than all my other Iditarods put together, just because that was the first one that left that impression on me. But it was it was something. I was never overwhelmed. And I was 18 years old, but I was traveling with my dogs, and your dogs become your best friends after spending year-round training them and working with them and everything else. And I took the race 1 mile at a time. So I was just worried about taking care of myself and my dogs, and camping along the trail and traveling to Nome. It was very exciting. It was something I dreamed of since I was 4 years old. It was to race the Iditarod. So traveling that trail and being able to meet people throughout the checkpoints, traveling 1,000 miles by dog team, was something that I can't put into words. It was pretty incredible. And being able to race it and complete the Iditarod and join the ranks of all the heroes that I grew up looking up to, and be able to participate in an event and race with them was pretty darn amazing. I remember 10 miles from the finish line in Nome, there's a big mountain called Cape Nome. And I came over, I crested that mountain right as the sun was starting to come up, and the sun was behind me as I was heading west for the finish line. And I stopped, and I could still see the lights in Nome 10 miles away. And I brought all my dogs together in a big dog pile, and they just circled around me, and I was hugging them. And I actually had tears in my eyes. I was crying a little bit, because it was something that I dreamed of since I was a child, and I was about to accomplish that goal. And I was running into Nome on my own home training trails, the trails that I grew up racing on and training dogs on. And I only had 10 miles from the finish line, and I didn't want the race to end. It was something you dream of your whole life, and being able to finally accomplish that goal was pretty amazing. And since that race, every single Iditarod that I've completed, I've always stopped on the top of Cape Nome, 10 miles from the finish line, and had a little dog pile the dogs, give them a snack and give them a little bit of love and hug them and then do that final 10 miles to Nome. And I remember my last Iditarod 2022, I stopped there at the top of the hill, the mountain, and I was overlooking Nome as I was coming into the finish, and I was taking a 5-minute breather and taking it all in with the dogs and having my little cry with them. And another musher came up on me, and I think we were racing for 7th and 8th place, and he stopped and he put his hook in because he saw my whole dog team in a dog pile around me, and he ran up to me and said, "Aaron, are you okay? Is everything all right?" And I was just sitting there loving on the dogs, and they were licking my face, and I said, "Everything is just fine." I said, "I'm having my little celebration with the dogs before I run to the finish line." And I said, "Go ahead." He said, "You don't want to race me?" And I said, "No, the time with my dogs is more important than racing for one position to the finish line." And so I had my little time with the dogs there and then ran on into the finish line. But that's my way of celebrating that year on the trail, that year of training, all the work we put into it with the dogs before we actually get to the finish line. And I always look forward to the finish line because my wife and kids and family and friends are all there waiting. But it's something that's pretty special, and that's one of my ways of celebrating it on the way to Nome every year.
You've come. Oh, sure.
I added something.
Oh.
Is it true?
Is it true you wore tennis shoes and run with your dogs at the end?
Many times I carry tennis shoes in my sled. And when we get on the coast or when we get into big hills and areas, I'll take my boots off and I'll put shoes on and I'll run with the dogs. So I think all of us as mushers will often wear tennis shoes and run with them. And we carry them in our sleds. It's kind of our extra shoes that we use for when we're in checkpoints and stuff to get around. But running with the dogs is something that we do when we get into the big hills or a tough, challenging trail. We're kind of like the 17th dog. We're working hard to help the team out and keep the team moving down the trail.
Among your 21 Iditarod finishes, which one stands out to you the most?
Looking back over all my Iditarod finishes, really what stands out, I think, is my rookie year in 1994, accomplishing that lifelong goal. In 2015, one of the most memorable experiences I've ever had. In 2015, I finished 3rd that year, but I led the race most of the way to Nome. And that was a year we started in Fairbanks, and it was the very first year that Iditarod went to the checkpoint of Husky. And Husky is north of Galena, but it's got a very rich dog mushing history. And when I arrived into Husky, I was the first Iditarod musher in history ever to arrive into Husky, and all the community of Husky was there. The neighboring villages at Alakakik came and they watched me come in, and it was like winning the Iditarod. It was an incredible experience to be the first musher there and be able to celebrate that with the communities. And one of the most famous dog mushers ever is George Atla, and George Atla was from the community of Husky. And there's a lot of the Beifelds, a lot of mushing, really rich mushing history that comes from that region. So to me, that was one of the most memorable experiences that I've ever had, was being the first musher into Husky that year with my dog team and having a good race as well.
Your best finish in the Iditarod was runner-up in 2021. Can you share the emotions you experienced when you finished?
I think even though I was second place in the Iditarod that year, my emotions were more disappointment, I think, than anything else, because I was so close, but I didn't pull it off. So I was happy for myself and the team to be second, but we didn't win. And that year, that was our goal, and we were racing hard to win the Iditarod. And so it motivated me more for the future, and really got me thinking about the basics and working harder and looking at things to improve so that we can do better the next time. So it was kind of a mixture of enjoyment, but also disappointment of not being able to pull it off.
In 2022, you decided to step away from the Iditarod. What led to this decision?
Well, my son Hunter is 15 years old now. My daughter Kayana is 11. And when you're committed to racing Iditarod and competing at that elite level, it's a year-round lifetime project. During the winters, we're training sometimes on the trail with the dogs 12 to 16 hours a day. So we're away from home a lot. And I made a decision to step back from Iditarod for a while to spend time with my family and my kids growing up and be able to go to their sporting events like soccer and basketball and all the things that they're interested in. So stepping back and to take time off was a decision that I made for myself and for the family. Coming back this year has been very exciting, but it was a family decision because my son Hunter is old enough to be on the trail running dogs, and he wanted to experience what I've been doing most of my life and be out there on the trail. My daughter Kayana has been very involved and helping with packing booties and working with the dogs in the dog yard. And we decided to do it one more time, kind of as a family project and working together. So this year we're doing it as a family. The kids are very supportive. My wife has been very supportive, and we're busy preparing for one more race.
The Iditarod is a physically and mentally demanding race. What are some of the biggest challenges you face out there?
You know, I'd have to say no challenge that we go out there for is insurmountable. I've grown up with the attitude that no matter what you set your mind to, whatever you set your goals to, you're going to accomplish that. You have to stay headstrong. There's times on the trail when you're cold, you're wet, you're miserable, and it may be 40 below and you're damp and soaking wet with sweat. But you have to take care of yourself so you can take care of your dogs. You have sore muscles, you're exhausted and tired, and you have to persevere, and you have to lift your head up and say, hey, I'm better than this, and I'm going to push through it. I'm going to accomplish that goal. No matter how, and on the Iditarod, you have the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. And those mental lows come along with your physical shape. By going into Iditarod in physically good shape, that helps you prepare you mentally as well. But you have to keep yourself fed. You got to keep yourself hydrated, as well as your 16 partners out there with your dogs. So taking care of yourself so you could take care of them, keeping yourself with a good attitude, because when you walk out the door or when you're out there camping with the dogs, if you're in good spirits and happy, the dogs pick up on it. They're happy and in good spirits too. If you get bummed out and tired, then the dogs will get bummed out and tired. They directly feed off of you. Just like if the two of you are best friends per se, and one of you is having a grumpy day, hopefully you don't make the other one grumpy. The other one needs to help cheer you up. You have to work together. So it's teamwork, and we work together out there as a team. But you got to remember to keep your head up, no matter how hard that physically or mentally is demanding, and how sore and tired and exhausted you are. You have to reach down deep and get another bowl of grit and just fight through it and work your way to the top. And I often tell my kids, when they're playing sports or basketball or baseball, pain doesn't hurt. Pain don't hurt. And you have to grit down and bear through it and push harder. And that's kind of one of the things that we've always done. So there are definitely those times, and you second guess things, but you have to keep your spirits up and push through it.
I'm sure a lot has changed in the Iditarod since you started in 1994. Can you share some insights on how things have evolved over the years?
You know, the one beauty of racing dogs and Iditarod is it's constantly evolving. And the sleds have changed, the gear has changed, the diet for the dogs and how we feed them and our education with the dogs has changed. The quality of the booties that we put on their feet has improved. We used to have to put booties on every 30 miles. There was a time when we used electrical tape to wrap booties on. Now we have Velcro, and we can boot up a whole team of dogs in 15 minutes. It used to take 45 minutes to help protect their feet. The diet that we're feeding the dogs, we're able to give them a lot more calories because we understand how feeding the dogs works better. Runner plastic that we put on our sleds has evolved, and it works for different snow conditions a lot better than it did 40 years ago, 30 years ago. So many things have evolved and changed. When I first started racing the Iditarod, the fastest Iditarod was a 10-day race. We've done it now in 7 days. So it's the constant improvement of dog care of feeding the dogs, our gear, and what we have to carry to take care of ourselves and the dogs has all improved. And so we're still constantly evolving and improving things. And that's one of the things that keeps me going, is you're always thinking ahead. How can I better improve this? And now we have high-tech sleds that are made out of carbon fiber and aluminum, where we used to have wooden and birch sleds 30, 40 years ago. So things have certainly evolved and continue to evolve every day.
Are there any specific advancements that have had an impact on your career?
My career as a dog musher or as a
dog musher.
Okay. So I look at dog mushing because I manage a large construction company and make a living at construction companies. So I work in construction, building roads, runways, revetment projects on seawalls and highways around Alaska. And so that I look at as my career. Dog mushing has been a passion and a love of mine and a hobby that I do, that I work hard in construction so that I can afford to pay for the dogs and be able to race the Iditarod. With advancements in mushing and myself, I think the biggest, most one of the things is our bond with the dogs. When you raise the dogs from puppies and you spend the time with them on the trail and you earn their trust, they become your best friends. And you spend thousands of miles in training every year working together with them, that trust only grows. They count on you for their next meal, to rub their sore muscles when they're tired, to put ointment on their feet when they're a little bit sore. And the bond that we share with our dogs, I think, is one of the most important things that carry us down the trail and that allow our relationship to improve because of the trust that's between you and them. So I think that's one of the most important things.
Finally, we have the Iditarod. Finally, we have the Iditarod Fast 5. We have 5 different Iditarod topics we'd like you to try to answer as fast as you can.
Okay.
First one is favorite musher.
My favorite musher? Herbie Nakpuck.
Favorite Iditarod book?
Oh, wow. There's so many books out there. You know, there was a group of Iditarod volunteers and mushers that put a book together that covers the history of the race. And that came out about 5 or 6 years ago. It's a really thick book. I can't think of the name of it. But do you guys have it there?
First 10 years.
Yes, the first 10 years. So that's probably my favorite book covering the race because it covers so much of the history and the beginning of it. And that's what I recommend to people. Iditarod, the first 10 years.
Favorite checkpoint?
Takatna.
Favorite
And that's because the Takatna has hot water for us. They spoil us. They feed us. They're wonderful people. My other favorite checkpoint would probably be Unalakleet because that's the first checkpoint along the coast. I love all the checkpoints and the people in the communities around them, but Takatna and Unalakleet would be certainly my favorite. When I get to Unalakleet, I feel like I'm home because I'm on the coast on my way back to Nome.
Yeah.
Favorite volunteer?
Oh, I could not pick a favorite volunteer. There's so many thousands of people that volunteer for the event every year. And so it'd be really hard for me to pick just one. That wouldn't be fair.
Favorite former champion?
Favorite former champion. You know, there's 2 champions that I look up to a lot. One is Rick Swenson, who helped evolve our sport and the race in many ways in the early years with improvements to cookers, improvements to dog sleds, improvements. He was always improving something in the sport. And somebody that I've looked up to since I was a little kid. He was always one of my biggest heroes back in the 70s and 80s. And so Rick Swenson. The other one would be Lance Mackey, because Lance dominated our sport and dominated Iditarod for a period of time in the early 2000s to mid 2000s. That was unbelievable. And the way he recovered from his cancer and came back winning the Iditarod and the Yukon Quest and just about every race he entered was pretty special.
Thanks so much for being on the show, Aaron. Good luck in the Iditarod.
Well, thank you guys very much. And you did a wonderful job. So thank you.
Special thanks to our guest, Aaron Burmeister, for being on the show this week. If you enjoyed this episode, please stop by iTunes and leave us a review. It helps with our ratings. Also, if you have any questions, comments, or people you would like to hear on the show, email us at huskytalk1@gmail.com. If we hear from you or you leave a review, we will read it on the show.
Oh, we would like to also give credit to Hobo Jim for our intro song, the Iditarod Trail song, and our outro song, Reddington's Run.
It's off we go in the land of the midnight sun. They call this race the Iditarod Trail. To me, it's Reddington's Run. In my heart, it's Reddington's Run.